What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you're joining me this morning, thank you for joining me this morning. If you're not, no worries. Uh, Thanks for watching. This I like my Saturday streams because they're a little chill. Um, I uh, I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome specifically. I, it's not just related to IT. Like I know I put in tech, but that's kind of the theme of the channel. If you haven't noticed, but I'm going to talk about it through across like all industries that I've had in my life, right? Um, so I've dealt with imposter syndrome multiple times in my life because I like to do this thing where I completely 180 from the job that I was previously doing into a new job. So, I've kind of dealt with this issue quite a bit. And, I think most people do get some level of imposter syndrome. Maybe there's those like Giga Chads out there that don't get it ever. And they're just super confident in their abilities, I guess. That ain't me. Pretty confident, but not like that. So basically, when I think every time I transition to a different career field, I deal with this. So, for example, my first job ever was Best Buy, and I don't think like even then I dealt with like a little bit because I was like, dude, I'm just some dumb high school kid. I don't know anything. Um, but I mean, I was a cashier, dog. Like, it's not really that much responsibility on you as a cashier. So, it didn't really hit as hard. And then right after high school, I joined the army. So that's something where it took me a long time to, I guess, feel like a soldier, and even then, I never really did, um, because even though you go through like boot camp and you go through like training and all that stuff, you don't. I still didn't feel like even when I got to my unit, even when I deployed to Afghanistan, I still did not feel like a soldier. Even though I was there doing it, I was just like, I feel like I'm just out of place here. Um, so I've kind of dealt with it there because there were people in obviously that have been in the army for like a decade and like they were all about it. You know what I mean? Like that's all they did their entire life. So it was kind of different for them. What is up to Christian Soto in the chat? Good morning with little coffee emojis. I know that's my check out my Omega Mart uh mug. So that's from Meow Wolf Vegas. That was a fun little art exhibit. I didn't know those were art exhibits until I went there. I thought they were just like adult playgrounds basically. And I mean, to be fair, they kind of are. It was pretty cool. I want to go to like the Santa Fe one and stuff, but I digress. But yeah, so I mean, even when I was in the army, I was with a bunch of people that were super senior. They had like, 2 or 3 deployments under their belt. So my hair is always perfect, says Christian Soto. I try, dude. I try. I just got a haircut yesterday. Shout out to my barber, because that dude is really good. He makes me not look like a bum. Um, it's many years of practice, Christian. It really is. And just training your hair to go a certain way. That's kind of how it works. Um, but yeah, so I was with a bunch of guys that had a ton of experience, and I was like, wow, I'm kind of just a dumb teenager, which I really was because I was like 18 years old when I joined the army. So, I felt really out of place, even though, like, I was doing the training. I deployed, I came back, and I'm like, all right, well, I feel like I have some skin in the game, but I still don't feel like I'm this like professional soldier. I think a lot of that just had to do with like my political ideologies at the time. I wasn't anti-authority. I mean, I am now, but I wasn't at the time. I wasn't super anti-authority or anything like that. Um, so I just didn't like. I wasn't as invested in that. You know what I mean? Because it didn't make sense to me as a kid. Like I was like, why are we doing all this? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's not like, like World War II or something like that. Oh, Tony, don't even get me started on that because I can go into that too. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I think that kind of attributed to my imposter syndrome, like when I was in the army, because I was like, I don't really feel like an army soldier, if you will. Um, and even when I got out, so I had worked on cars pretty much the entire time I was in the army, right? So from the moment I could afford my first cool car, which was like pretty much typical new private behavior, I went out and I bought uh, the car that I've always wanted as a kid, which was specifically a 2004 Subaru STI. So that was what I wanted, and I had that for many years. I had it for 7 years after that. Um, but naturally, I couldn't afford to pay anybody to work on it, right? So I had to do it myself. And shout out to my buddy Jeff, Jeff Magai. If you're watching this, if the Magai family is watching this, shout out to you guys because you guys really started that the whole mechanic thing. Because I didn't know anything. Like I knew nothing about working on car. If you showed me a spark plug, I'd be like, I don't even know what that is, dog. Is that even part of a car? Like seriously, that guy really got me started in working on cars. That guy literally showed me how to do my first oil change ever in my Dodge Intrepid. So he kind of like sparked that interest. Like I've always been interested in cars, during I was a kid, but I didn't have anyone to show me how to work on cars. You know what I mean? Like, it's so that to me was a natural progression outside of the army, but I had no formal training in doing it. I was literally like a shade tree mechanic. I was working on that Subaru like in the parking lot of an apartment in Kansas when my landlord wasn't there on the weekends because that was the only place I could do it. So I was literally like tearing this thing apart and having it back together before Monday morning because of course it was my only vehicle, of course, um so I had to absolutely put it back together before I had to go to work in the army in the morning of Monday mornings. But either way, so that was like a natural progression for me. But even then, after I got out of the army, I didn't go into it like professionally. Like I didn't work at a dealership or I didn't like go to tech school or anything like that. So actually a friend of mine, a former friend of mine, we're not really on speaking terms anymore. It is what it is. He wanted to start a performance shop specifically for Subarus. And I was like, yeah, dude, like I'm down. I'll do it. Um, Ended up only working there for a few months because, the pay wasn't great. And I understand like starting a new business, it's very difficult to pay your employees well. You know what I mean? Like I get it. I understand. And not to mention like I didn't know nearly as much as I know now at that time. Um like getting out of the industry, Cody, versus like just getting into the industry, Cody, dude, would blow that guy out of the water. Like seriously. Um so I did that for a couple months after getting out of the army and then I couldn't sustain myself like realistically. So I had to look elsewhere. I had to actually get like a W-2 job, not just paid in cash under the table the whole time. So I ended up applying to a dealership, which even then, technically, I didn't have formal training. At that time, I was going to a tech school. But honestly, I kind of knew the basics pretty well. Like I knew more than the tech school was actually teaching, like except for like the performance aspect because it was specialized in like performance tuning. So that I learned a ton from that, and then I kind of applied that. But then I went and joined a dealership, so we didn't even use it. You know what I mean? Whatever. But so obviously, when I got to the dealership, I had never had any formal training, so I was like, huge imposter syndrome there. I was like, honestly, like I feel like the only thing I know is Subarus. And it was actually so I worked in Jaguar Land Rover. So totally different brand, like not even remotely close to what I was working on. Little Subarus to basically these huge SUVs and huge cars that are all at the time were built by Ford and in the past BMW. Um, So that was a huge imposter syndrome leap for me as well, because I didn't consider myself a technician until pretty much a year before I left that job. So, and honestly, how I kind of dealt with that, I did want to talk about like how you deal with it. I'm not just going to leave you hanging, right? So most of the time, in my experience, when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's just the I guess the fear of like not knowing. You know what I mean? So you don't know what you don't know, type of deal, and it's totally normal. Like, honestly, if you're just getting into an industry and people know you're just getting into an industry, they're not going to expect you to understand everything about everything. You know what I mean? They're taking a little bit of risk when they bring on a new person, right? And that's applicable to the dealership world, and that's applicable to the tech world. I think it's applicable to pretty much anywhere you're going to work, right? They're, except for like your normal like retail jobs, they're just looking for body, like a cashier at Best Buy, for example. Dude, they don't care. Like, literally stand here, count money, even though like the register kind of does it for you, but whatever. Um, and just do your job. But if you're going into like anything that requires some type of like hard skill, the employer is always going to take a risk bringing you in. So obviously, that as a person, you're like, wow, they just hired me and I feel like a dummy. You know what I mean? So you're not going to know a lot when you get in, but it's an investment on their part. And that's what you kind of have to understand, is like, these guys are investing in you to build you the way they want you to be in some ways. So don't stress too much. It's going to come with time, but just, honestly, the biggest takeaway I can give for like imposter syndrome is, don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions. Like, seriously, that is the number one thing I can tell you guys. Like, don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, because chances are they're not actually stupid questions, and it'll make you seem a lot more engaged into what you're doing. Like, you give a shit about what you're doing, basically. So definitely ask those questions that you don't know, that you think are dumb questions or you should know. Because I've made that mistake in the past where I'm like, man, I really want to ask this question, but I don't want to look like a retard. So I'm just not going to ask. I'm going to try to figure it out on my own. Every time I've done that, it has always ended not badly, but it's always ended like less optimally than it could have. Where if I just would have asked the question, they're just been like, oh yeah, just do this. Like, it was super simple. And it was just like a lapse in understanding on my part, just because I didn't have the experience. And then, you know, transitioning into IT was like a huge jump and a huge imposter syndrome factor, just because like it was like nothing I had ever done before. Most of my adult like jobs have been like, I guess you would consider blue collar, because I was combat arms in the army, so that was definitely I would consider a blue collar job. I was an 11 Charlie. Shout out to my mortar men out there. If you're watching this, you're probably not, but it's cool. Um, so I was, combat arms, definitely a blue collar job, and then I go into working on cars, which is unequivocally a blue collar job, right? So going into IT, and then a lot of people call it like the trade of technology, which it kind of is, to be honest with you. Like, it's very similar, the thought process behind like how you solve some of these problems. But to me, it was totally new because it was all intellectual. And I knew I knew I was above average intelligence, but I didn't think I was like this level of intelligence. You know what I mean? And honestly, you don't have to be super smart to code. Like, dude, go over to Self-Taught Hustle's channel and he'll tell you that all day, dude. Go talk to Fido and he will tell you, like, you don't have to be like gigabrain to learn how to code, or even code in general. But like at the time, I was like, I always attributed this career field to like really highly intelligent people, 140 IQ types, which is not the case, but you do have your people who are extremely, extremely smart in this field. Obviously, those are the people that are like building new systems that you've never even heard of before. Those are the people like building the entire blockchain on whatever, flavor of the month, Ethereum shit token. You know what I mean? Like, they're doing some real work. Not to say that people who don't do that don't do real work, but they're doing some really hard. They're solving some really hard problems that you can't find on Google. You know what I mean? You just have to know like an underlying knowledge base to know that. So making that jump into IT, huge imposter syndrome, dude. Like enormous, bro. Because I was like, dude, I am just like a dumb grunt. I'm just a dumb mechanic. Like I don't know. I don't know this computer nerd stuff. Turns out I actually did know pretty well. Shout out to Hack Reactor because they really set me up for success, even in the cloud. Like it was a web development boot camp. So, but even transitioning into the cloud, dude, I was able to just take some information and just run with it, dude. Like literally, it's applicable. Like learning web develop because Hack Reactor kind of teaches you how to think or how to learn a new technology or work with a new technology. They get you in the mindset, and I think this is applicable to anything that like gets you into IT, right? It's about teaching the mindset on how to learn new things and how to like solve problems in an IT related field, right? And that's what it's all about. It's not knowing about specific tools or specific technologies or working with certain things, even though the industry recruiters tend to think it is. It's not. That's not what it's about. But dealing with imposter syndrome when it comes to IT is like understanding that, or switching to any job field really, is understanding that you're going to start at the bottom and you're going to have to build your way up and you have to be all right with it. You know what I mean? You have to be willing to be the dumbest person in the room sometimes. And that's just kind of the nature of it. They're not, like I said in the beginning, they're not expecting you to know all of this stuff. Like they're making an investment into you. They're, as long as you have the work ethic and the willingness to learn, what they need you to learn, dude, that's all you need. You don't necessarily need to like know all this stuff. Like they know you're not going to know all this stuff, but your ability to learn it in real time and ability to ask the right questions and fix problems. Like at the end of the day, you're there to solve problems. Like most jobs are, you're there to solve problems, especially in IT. You're there to solve a specific problem that they want you to solve, whether you've worked with the tools or not. So when you get your first IT job, or even when I go from job to job in IT, I'm like, okay, I knew what I was doing relatively well, sometimes. And now I'm going to a new job where it's completely different. They have different procedures, they're working with different stuff. So I get it from job to job, even now. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, I don't know what I'm doing at all. like, but that's kind of the nature of IT. Like, literally every job I've gone to, I'm like, I don't know what is going on at all. And it takes quite a while to understand the environment and how it works. So be patient, stick it out, ask the dumb questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions. Of course, do your research, especially in IT. Like, when you ask those dumb questions, come armed with information so you can be like, hey, all right, I really don't understand how this works. I know there's this part that does this, there's this part that does this, and there's this part that does this, but I don't understand how all of them fit together. Like, can you like shed some light on it? Or, I don't know where to look to solve this problem. You know what I mean? Can you point me in the right direction so I can kind of like look at it and visualize it and understand what's going on? So that is a big part in overcoming that imposter syndrome. And eventually over time, it's going to get to the point where you're just like, your team really well, and like they don't expect you to know everything. Like even the senior guys, they don't expect them to know everything. Like in IT, a completely acceptable answer for a problem is like, hey, I don't really know. I'm going to have to spend some time and like do some research on it. That's a completely accessible and acceptable answer in IT. And it's probably like the only space where people are like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, I get that. You know, you could say that as a mechanic too, but then the customer's going to look at you like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, because you're expected to know everything as a mechanic, right? But in IT, there's just so much information. Telling people like, hey, dude, like, I don't know. I've never worked with this. I don't even know what the hell it is, but give me like a couple days and I'll figure out what's going on. You know what I mean? And that's a completely acceptable answer. Dude, senior people use that all the time, and it's true because they work with such a large multitude of tools. Dude, it's impossible. It's impossible to know everything. But when you, like I said, if you're feeling that imposter syndrome, even at a new job, even if you've been in IT or you're a cloud engineer or you're a software developer for a while, you can feel it from job to job. If you're working with a new tech stack, for example, you still understand how to program or how to develop or how to, DevOps, whatever you're doing, you still know how to do it at its core for the most part. Now you're just applying it to a new set of tools and a new environment. So just understand, like, if you have a baseline of knowledge, people know it's going to take a little while for you to like get up to speed. Um, for example, like the job that I'm at now, it took me a couple months to get up to speed, and I'm still like I still don't know everything about it. And eventually, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Who knows? It takes a while in IT. That's the one thing like that people don't talk about is how long it takes to onboard, like truly onboard. You can do the HR stuff in like a day or, 2 days max. But when it comes to like being effective in the environment, it takes a while, dude. It takes like a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, depending on how like nuanced or how fucked up the environment is. You know what I mean? So it might take you a while to learn that. And I think that's understandable, especially if you're coming in as someone where they know who has less experience than, some of the guys that have been in the industry for like 10, 20, 15 years, especially in cloud, dude. Like when it comes to cloud, there's a lot of senior people in here. Like there's a lot of people that have been in the industry for like, 10 years or 15 years or whatever the case may be. Because basically being a systems admin is a direct port into being cloud because it's the same thing. It's just remote. You know what I mean? It's not like you're working on premises. Um, so you're just learning how to do the same thing you've done as a sysadmin in cloud, basically. And it's just it's just the nature of the beast as a relatively low experienced guy coming in because like I've only been in this industry for like 2 years, so me trying to claim I'm an expert in anything, bro, they know, come on, they know. So my advice, my overall advice is to just relax, just chill out, understand that they know you're not going to know everything, and don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions. And when you're actually doing stuff and you're fixing problems, eventually that imposter syndrome is going to start to go away. It's going to start to lift because you're like, oh, because honestly, some of the problems are kind of repetitive. So as you start working in their environment and getting familiar with how their stuff works, that imposter syndrome is going to kind of like fall off quite a bit. You're going to get to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I know what's going on. And someone can just tell you like, hey, what do you think about this? And you're like, okay, well, I've been working with that system and I think this needs to happen. You know what I mean? And then you go try to implement it, and then if it works, you'd be like, okay, cool, it worked. But sometimes it doesn't work, and you're like, all right, that totally didn't work, so I'm gonna have to scrap that idea and let's brainstorm a new idea. And that's just kind of the nature of things. So as you progress in that job field, as you progress in that job specifically, you're going to gain more confidence because confidence comes from competence. So being competent in what you're doing is going to make you more confident. That imposter syndrome is going to kind of fall away. But understand that it happens to everybody, and stick it out because I think some people do like get imposter syndrome and they're like, oh, I'm just not meant for this job. And then they quit. You know what I mean? And then they go back to something they know. Don't do that. Absolutely don't do that. That imposter syndrome, that struggling that you're doing, that is how you're getting better. Like that is, if you want to know, like, I guess the secret to like getting ahead, anything that is like difficult or feels uncomfortable or like, oh, this isn't for me, push through that and that will get you to the next level. Like that's how it works. That's how it works with everything. Like again, I've had a wide range of jobs throughout my short life here on earth, and every single time where I felt super uncomfortable and I said, oh, dude, fuck it, I just have to do it, every time on the other side, I became a better person from doing that. And it's not like I knew that consciously at the time. Like now I know that because I've dealt with that situation so many times. Like I don't ever say no to a problem that seems difficult. I always say yes to like, hey, can you do this? I'm like, yeah, even though I have no idea where to even begin. So if that is an obstacle for you, that obstacle, there's like a quote somewhere I saw on Instagram, some of these like crazy, like, you know, I don't know, these stupid pages on Instagram that post like motivational quotes or whatever. It was like the path forward is the obstacle that is currently in your way. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of how I use my compass. That's kind of how I navigate life, is like everything that seems difficult, that's the direction I go. You know, the whatever the harder of the multiple choices are, or the hardest of the multiple choices in life, I end up picking the hard way because every time I enjoy the process while doing it. One, and two, at the other side of it, I end up being a better person because of it, or a more skilled, a more competent individual. Um, and the same goes for like the job. Like, don't stray away from those hard problems. Like, don't like if someone gives you a difficult task, don't try to weasel your way out of it. Be like, all right, like I'll do it, but I'm gonna need some help with it. You know, like just be straight up. Be like, listen, I'll do it. I'll do the hard problem. I'm just gonna need some context behind it and maybe some assistance at some point. And I think that is the best way to deal with imposter syndrome, at least for me. Hopefully, that'll work for y'all too. I'm pretty sure it will. I'm pretty sure it will. Just don't stray away from the hard problems. Like if this is a career you're invested in, like if this is a career you're just like not just IT, but like if you're like a Walmart like shelf stalker and like you don't want to do this long term, then dude, get in and get out, bro. But if it's something you legitimately want to get better at, then yeah, dude, absolutely. Like, you know, strive for those hard problems because it's going to make you better and it's going to like further your understanding of that field, not just for the job, but for your overall understanding, right? But hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I'm going to end the stream because I actually have a lot more stuff to do today. But I hope this was kind of insightful for you guys to help you overcome some of that imposter syndrome stuff and to push through these challenges. Um, if it was, leave a like on the video. If it wasn't, leave a comment. Let me know. Let me know your techniques of overcoming imposter syndrome, or maybe something you're dealing with that you need help with. Uh, all of my information on how to contact me is in the description. So if you need help with something, please let me know. Reach out to me. I'll try to help you the best I can. With that being said, guys, thanks for joining me today. And you guys have an excellent weekend. See you guys.